and progressivism as Christians, specifically when kind of thinking of it from a Christian perspective? What are some key takeaways do we think that we can get from this whole conversation?
Well, one thing I could say for sure right now is this is where I insert my disclaimer, because I know when we blow up on this podcast and we get big, somebody's going to come back to this podcast and try to cancel us. So this is my whole clearing the air. So if you're watching this in like 10 years from now and you're listening to me, like, and you're trying to defend me, this is exactly where you would cut to at 41:25, right? Right. But no, yeah, at the end of the day, it's like yo, like, we gotta love everybody, bro. We really, like, I know that's like the hippy dippy kind of crazy thing to say, but we gotta be in the culture, right? And we see back in like the 60s and 70s, like the gospel thriving in the United States because the Christians of the time adopted this cultural identity of the hippies. They weren't practicing hippie like the sinful part of hippie culture, but like they adopted this cultural aspect of, like, you know, the vibe of like the hippie movement. And we see so many people coming to know Jesus in the 60s and 70s because of them adopting that culture and really using that culture to, you know, to get into, you know, get next to people, because you're not spreading the gospel sitting in your room reading the Bible. You know, sitting in your room reading the Bible is great, but how is that spreading, you know, bringing the gospel forward, you know? And like, you know, you definitely need to be in the world, not of the world, but you need to be in the world to spread the gospel. So it's like, there's definitely a level of adapting to the culture. Like, I feel like that's definitely the reason, like not the reason, but one of the reasons that God chose the Apostle Paul, you know, like he's from the tribe of Benjamin, but he was also, you know, a Greco-Roman citizen, you know,
Right.
so, you know, educated at a not, I like, maybe not the top school, but a good school, right? Because, you know, the gospel had to go through Asia Minor. The gospel had to go through all of, you know, Greece, you know, all through Italy. It had to go through everywhere. So it's like, how, like, think about it in this context. Like, imagine I speak like some unknown language only known to one portion of the world, but I want to take the gospel to America. How am I going to do that without learning the language? You know what I'm saying? How am I going to know that without knowing what the traditional wear of America is? You know, like, how am I going to do that? You're going to tell me it's sinful because you're used to seeing me wear a certain different type of clothing. You know what I'm saying? Cultural context goes really, really hand in hand with evangelism and spreading the gospel and all that. So that's kind of like my final wrap up with that. But it's like, again, I just want to say, like, the gospel is meant for every type of person, you know, every tribe's tongue and nation. So we definitely need to be aware that we can't just box out certain people groups or box out certain cultures because we don't understand the nuance of these cultures. We need to understand the cultures, and we need to do this in truth and in love. Because if you minus the truth, then you're in sin. If you minus the love, then you're in sin. So definitely stay with the truth and love. You know, stand for what's right, but do that in love, you know, in a loving way.
Yeah. But kind of to that previous point that you just had about being in culture and whatnot, the first person that kind of comes into my mind with that is my boy Lecrae, where he has all these different contacts and whatnot, and friends within non-Christian culture. You know, he's definitely within, like, I can imagine he knows so many of these world famous rappers who aren't necessarily Christian and whatnot, but yet my boy gets a lot of flack because of it, because of the people that he surrounds himself with. And, you know, like, I think that kind of points back to us as a culture, as a Christian culture. You know, like, how are we, the Cray interview coming soon, but like, how are we as a Christian culture to bring people to the gospel if we don't, quote unquote, infiltrate, you know, culture, and, you know, not do it in the sense where we want to manipulate people into the gospel, but do it in a way where we're loving them and bringing them into the truth. And that's
say it again for the people in the back.
Yeah, and so someone like Lecrae, you know, I feel like is a perfect person to, you know, fit himself into the culture because it's something that he grew up with and whatnot. And then you can go on with a whole list of people like that.
Chance the Rapper.
And then
Oh,
not
now
just
they're gonna cancel us for real now. Yo, now they're gonna cancel us for real.
and then you even look outside of just hip hop culture and whatnot, music culture in general, and then you just apply it to your own field, your own domain, and your own work. If you're an IT guy, do that for God and do it in a way where Christ is revealed through your work and whatnot and through your culture. If
Yeah,
you're in
you need to
school,
be spreading the gospel when you fixing them servers. You
when
need
you're
to be
fixing the
spreading the
servers, bro,
gospel
hey,
when
dude,
you're
hey,
mopping
listen,
the floor. You need to be spreading the gospel when you're in the library. You know what I'm saying?
for real, when you're fixing that computer and you're like, you see how I'm changing the interior of the computer and the design. You see, that's what Jesus does inside of us. He changes our
Oh
interior.
man, this man getting
Yo,
picturesque.
bro, I think it's crazy. Just on a note, and I'll give my final takeaway or whatever. But I think it's crazy that like kind of the same people that like are like going heavy on like on this or whatever are kind of the same people that won't tell their coworkers about Jesus, right? Like they're like these same
Oh,
people
he
that
wants
like
to smoke.
bro, they like people like Christians that are working in like architecture, business, finance, whatever it may be, bro. Like they're so like bet like online on social media, like, hey, this is crazy. Like people need to come back to God, people whatever. But it's like, yo, bro, like you're scared to talk about Jesus to your coworker, bro. You're scared to talk about Jesus, about Jesus with your family, and it's like, bro, if you can't do that, bro, you have no right to comment on the culture. To be honest, like if we're keeping in the buck, bro, like if you're not bold enough, and honestly, it's like power of the Holy Spirit, bro. But if you're not relying on the Holy Spirit to talk to people closest to you about Jesus, you have no say in this conversation because you're not impacting anybody. To be
Yeah,
honest,
yeah. That's like the whole log in the eye kind of thing, like
Yeah, I was
like
just
you
about to
over
say.
here pointing out like, wood chips, but like there's a whole log lodged in your eye. There was a
Yeah.
teacher I had back in high school. She used to say every time you point at somebody, right? 3 fingers are pointing back at you. And I was like, yo, that's wild, bro. I never point at anybody after that, bro.
bro.
And that is especially like a huge thing that I'm hearing with like people who are kind of going through a deconstruction phase in their faith, where they're saying, well, this whole church culture has been pointing at me and people like me, as having sinned and going to hell and whatnot, but then they're hypocrites because they're doing the same things, if not worse.
Bro,
And
we
then
all hypocrites at the end of the day, bro.
Yeah.
but yeah, no, and so kind of pointing that back where it's like, wait, are we looking really at ourselves? Are we looking at the interior, or are we allowing God to work out? So yeah, no, definitely on that point.
Bro,